Alright, welcome back to the SuperCoach Nuff channel. In this video we're looking at the SuperCoach stock market in going into round 15 of the 2023 season. Probably the biggest year so far in terms of SuperCoach, with a couple of big injuries, a couple of other incidences around the league. So it's going to make for a very interesting week of trading. Um, so before we get into it, something a bit different this week, and we'll probably look at over the coming weeks. But looking at, I guess, the team buy ranking. So essentially, we're at the stage of the competition where everyone's played different numbers of games and has different buys coming up and scheduled. So I thought we'd take a moment just, excuse me, to go through the teams. And I guess, if you're trying to weigh up a couple of players from a given team, uh, you could probably use the overall buys that are left as a bit of a tiebreaker, perhaps. So I guess in ranked number one, I've got two teams there, the Sharks and the Tigers. Essentially, they only have one buy left, which is in round 17. They both got the buy in round 17. So it means they both play 16 and 19, and obviously, other than round 17, they play every other game this year. So, you know, keepers from the Sharks like Britton Nico, obviously Nico Hines, if you're willing to hold him through the Origin bye rounds. Um, they're great shouts from the Sharks. For the Tigers, Dream Buller is the obvious standout. There's a couple other potential options which we'll talk about in the stock market today. I won't give away all my secrets too early. But you know, they're probably best positioned if you want a set and forget player for the rest of the season. After that, I've ranked the Bulldogs and Eels together because they have two buys left, so they aren't the same buys, obviously. The Bulldogs also have round 17 as a buy. The Eels have round 18 coming up, so probably would actually put the Eels slightly ahead of the Bulldogs, but I thought, you know, it's fairly even when you look at it. They both play 16 and 19. So the players from there, you read Marnies or your Jacob Carraz from the Bulldogs. The Eels, you've obviously got the likes of Jermaine Hopgood, Mitchell Moses, if you're that way inclined. Could be really good buys during that time. And then obviously going through the rest of the season. Excuse me. The third rank, I've got a group of five teams: Panthers, the Storm, the Roosters, the Seagulls, and the Knights. So they all have one bye left, which means they've already had two byes so far. They all play round 16, and it's just a coincidence that their final bye is all round 19. So if you've got enough numbers for round 19, you can hold a heap of these players like your Harry Grants or your Joey Manu's, Isaiah Yeo from the Panthers, perhaps Tommy Turbo from the Seagulls, Kalen Ponga from the Knights, if you're that way inclined. So those players, they're fairly reasonable to hold, but just know that they won't play in that round 19 bye. So the Titans are slightly below them, and that's purely because they play in round 19 but not round 16. So in the short term, probably not as good to have the Titans players. But after round 16, I think they're the first team to clear all three of their buys. So the likes of David Fafita, Big Tino, are going to be, really great options for the run home. The next level, I've got the Raiders, Dolphins, Warriors, and Dragons all lumped together. They've only had the one bye so far this year, and they will all have their second bye in round 16. But they do play in round 19. So, sprinkling a few of those players into your side will probably help with that last bye round. So that will cover, obviously, the teams in the rank 3 there. But yeah, obviously, if you wanted to get off these players to prepare for round 16, it's probably not the worst. So the Cowboys are ranked 6th. They're only having their first bye this week. So obviously have been great for the first half of the season, but now's the time where it sort of tips. They do play round 16, so you can hold on to the Cowboys players this week, but they don't play round 19, and then there's another bye later in the season. I don't remember the exact round off the top of my head. So players like Val Holmes, um, just trying to think of another popular player from Cowboys, Scott Drinkwater, for example. They're probably players that you're not going to get as much games out of as some of these other teams. So you may want to sideways them to get the coverage for the back half of the season. Uh, Ranked number 7, I've got Souths. They're in a similar situation to the Cowboys in that they haven't had their first bye yet. But the only reason I guess they do have an advantage over the Broncos is that they do play round 19. So, your Damien Cooks, who else is from the Campbell Graham, Alex Johnston, I suppose, if you're that way inclined. Cody Walker and Latrell, of course. How could I forget those two? They're decent holds, but just be mindful that in the back half of the season there will be a couple of buys that they're not available for, and then or a couple of rounds, sorry, that they're not available for because of the bye. And I've got the Broncos last, and it just comes down to the fact that they haven't had a bye yet. They will have one in round 16. They will also have one in round 19. So, you're missing out on the coverage during that origin period. And then also there'll be another game later in the season where the likes of Payne Haas, um, Reece Walsh won't be available. I guess on the flip side, if you look at those origin players, so someone like a Payne Haas or a Reece Walsh, you're assuming they're playing origin anyway, so they're not going to play around 16 or 19 anyway. So it could actually be a bit of an advantage for those origin players. But I guess those players that aren't playing origin, um, I was going to say like an Adam Reynolds, but with the Nathan Cleary news, there's a bit of word on the street that it could be him stepping up. Obviously, if he's missing in those buy rounds, you're not going to get the value from it. But yeah, just wanted to quickly go through those rankings. Excuse me. And yeah, just keeping that in mind as we go through. But I guess if we resume regular transmission, we'll start with the premium hookers. So 500k and above. Excuse me, I got a really scratchy throat this afternoon. The top of the list got Appy Coruscant. So I guess sort of dipping again with the 40 last week. Obviously, playing 80 minutes in Origin and then backing up 48 hours later probably isn't the best way to go about it. But that has obviously put a dent in his 3 round average. His break even has reset somewhat. So I think you wait on that pick. It will be interesting to see, if some of the rumours are true. Damien Cook does get a look in the Origin side. That obviously reduce Appy's minutes, and then obviously that could positively impact his SuperCoach scoring. Reece Robson, so on the bye this week, 56 on the weekend. That's ticking along pretty much on par. So if you've got him, I think you hold to around 16, and then you can flip him to. There's a couple of different options. Blake Brayley, so we've got him as a bipod. He'll sort of chip along at that 55, 56 average. Might have a spike game here and there, but he is playing a lot, and as we talked about, the Sharks have that really nice buy coverage going forward. Damien Cook, so 66 on the weekend. He's a gun. The only thing that might sort of put us off is if he does force his way into the New South Wales side, they want to go with a 2 hooker strategy to combat, I guess, what Queensland did in the first game. But, if you can afford to hold him, you do that anyway. Cody Nikorima, so another nice score on the weekend with a 73. But even then, his price has peaked. That massive 100 and whatever he got will be out of his 3 round average now. So I think this is the time to cut your losses with, or not losses, cut your gains. Bank your profit with Nicarima. As you can see, it doesn't cost too much to move to Damien Cook, for example. Um, you could even go to Reece Robson and make some money. There's plenty of options available of how to use that money off Nicarima. Jeremy Marshall King, so late out last week, which was disappointing for owners, but should be good to go this week. A nice point of difference option, for those that do have him. And Harry Grant, so I guess similar to Appy Coruscant, sort of was a bit flat. Admittedly, didn't play 80 minutes, but Queensland did do a lot of defence and that sort of stuff, which obviously takes it out of the tank. But he's a gun. I mean, he sort of is slipping in value, so it's probably not really worth a trade out because you will want to trade him back in on the run home. And if you do that with all the Origin players, you're going to very quickly run out of trades. Onto the cheapy hooker options, and at the top of the list again this week is Jacob Little. So 37 last week, which is probably more like what we would expect. So even though he's got a nice negative break even, I think the ship has sailed on that pick. That big 130 score or whatever it was he got will probably only last another week in the average, and then his price will peak, and you'll want to move onto another option with the Dragons on the bye anyway next week. Jake Turpin, so 55 from him. Played, I think, about 60 minutes. So, I think that's what we can expect from him while Brandon Smith's out of the side. A bit of a slow burner, not going to make us a heap of cash, but definitely will get us some on-field points for the next few weeks. Ray Stone, so 64 on the weekend, and I guess his prospects have been boosted by the unfortunate news that Tommy Gilbert's out for the season with that shoulder injury that he suffered in Origin 1. It was a fair bit more damage than what he expected. So the fact he's also dual position could be quite handy. Not that there's a great deal of options to swing with in the second row, but potentially could be used in the hooker slot, could be used in the second row, and you'd think he'd have a decent sort of stranglehold on that 13 jersey for the Dolphins. Jake Granville on the bye this week, so 36 last week. He's just about done his job for us. If you wanted to move him to Stone, that would make sense. You can even go him to Turp and make some money. Or if you've got money elsewhere, you can obviously upgrade in the near future. Wade Egan, so scored 61 last week, is named to start this week. The Warriors have named 4 forwards on their bench. So Frankie Lussick is on the extended reserves, though, so it'll be interesting to see how it lines up. Given they've got the bye this week, I wouldn't be rushing to get on Wade Egan. So I think he's a little bit of a trap if you're looking to trade in a cheap option. And Reid Marnie, so another head knock issue. A few weeks ago, it was obviously Big Tino with the forearm. This last week, Suwali with the knee. He's probably too tough for his own good sometimes, poor old Reid. But interestingly, is named to play. The Bulldogs are hoping that he can clear concussion protocols in 7 days. But even then, I think you just wait. Obviously, he's got quite a high break even there. So he will dip in price. You could even potentially wait till after their round 17 bye, and then you could trade him. So especially if you've got someone like a Reece Robson or those sort of players that you want to get out of with those worst buys towards the back end, obviously then Red Marnie would be a great pick at a very nice price. So onto the front row options, and at the top of the list is Big Tino Fa'asuamaleaui. Malawi. So 103 last week, backing up after Origin. Don't know how he does it. Break even of 31, but at 770, that's a lot of money. But he's an absolute gun, and I'll be honest, I'm trying to find a way to bring him into my team this week. I know in the round review for round 14, for all the different platforms, I was trying to squeeze him into as many as we can. Um, but it's just how good he is, you know. Him and Haas are clearly the top two. You know, might be a bit of disrespect on Fanua Blake there, but just their work rates are unreal. And, you know, their Supercoach scoring as a result is equally impressive. Joey Tarpany, so 67 on the weekend, you know, so he just keeps pumping out 60s for fun. Um, I guess in the past I've had the pod symbol on him, but the fact that he's so well owned, I don't think that's appropriate. So I've bought in the keeper symbol this week. So for those sort of popular options that people are keeping, and I think Joey Tarpany is one that you can definitely keep onto. I mean, like I said, I'm targeting Haas and Tino as my top two in the front row. But I mean, if you've got Tarpany as your third front row option, I think you know that's pretty well set. You can obviously swing Tino and Tarpany into the second row as well, so they do have that purpose there as well. Corey Horsburgh, so 48 on the weekend, returning into that middle forward role. So I think his price has peaked. The Raiders obviously have a bye next week. There's every chance he could get a Guernsey in Origin now that Tommy Gilbert's on the bench. You know, it'll be a very like for like style replacement. Um, and yeah, that would obviously then impact his ability to score in round 19 as well. So if I had Horsburgh, I'd probably look to move him on. Um, you know, there's some value around the price. You know, if you can go up to a Tino or something like that, absolutely get on. Ruben Cotter, so backed up from his massive effort in Origin with the 49. So he will see a little dip in price, but he's on the buy this week. He won't play next week because of Origin. So you'd imagine if you had him and you wanted to sideways him, that's fine. If you can afford to hold him, could be a pretty useful back end of the season option, point of difference option. Tohu, so another keeper. 57's not quite the 60 average, but we know what he's capable of. Pretty much identical profile to Tarpany, so you can have one or the other. I've still got both, so perhaps we'll move on one of them in the near future, but their versatility is very handy. Payne Haas, say 62, it sort of is dwarfed by Tino's score, but for the effort that he puts in with Origin, to return a 62 is really nice. So he's a gun. We're not getting rid of him anytime soon. Fanua Blake, 63. So, equal sort of output to Payne Haas, averaging 71. So he is up there with those other guns. So put some respect on his name there. And Jack DeBellin. So did score a 37, which has sort of seen his price peak. I think he's definitely one to consider for given the chop. Um, again, there's so many other options around the price that are probably a bit more consistent. Um, yeah, 3 round average of 52 is sort of lagging towards the back of the pack there as well. So on to the mid-range options, and the top of the list is Weirmut Greg. So unfortunately, news is coming out today that he's had uh, Liz Frank surgery, so on his foot, is expected to be out for at least 3 months, which is essentially until the end of the Supercoach season. And so we had him as a nice little cover in the front row during the Origin break. He did massive for us in the first bye round, but that's the last we're going to see of him this season, unfortunately. So if you do have him like I do, I think you've got to get out of the pick. Um, it is a fairly awkward price. Um, if you've got the money to go up to a gun, that's not the worst idea in the world. But I think if you need to go down, the next player on the list, Samuel Afinu from Manly, is the best buy this week. In terms of the best cheapie option across the board, so from centre wing all the way through. Named to start again on the edge for Manly. Negative break even, close to bottom dollar still. Um, yeah, so he won't score massive. That 31 average is mostly attributed to his. I think he scored about 50 the other week, starting on the on the edge. So obviously, a couple of games off the bench to start with have dipped that average. So it will be a slow burn, but if you do need to make some money, I really like that shout. Tavita Pangai, so 76, backing up for Origin, a bit of a point to prove for him as well. Wanting to get another run. He knows that he let the team down at a crucial point in the game. But that's the style of game he plays: high risk, high reward. So I guess until we see how the Origin teams shape up, he's probably a wait. We have talked about him being a nice option, fairly cheap, covering that second row, front row flexibility, and hopefully covering those buy rounds if he's not selected for New South Wales. Hame Saleh, so 78 on the weekend. I haven't looked at the stats too closely, but I'm assuming there's a try in there somewhere. A nice DPP option. Obviously doesn't play around 16, which is a bit of a potential concern. But if you got him in as that cheap option, he's got that little spike and could make a bit more cash that you could squeeze out to potentially upgrade to a gun later on in the season. So Stefano, Udikamanu, Royce Hunt, they sort of seem to be getting grouped together again this week, both low 40s. And I think that's, what you expect. If you look at their averages, it's about right. So, yeah, if you are looking for a mid-price option, maybe, you've got a little bit of cash to go up from Greg to someone. You could do, a lot worse than look at those two. But I think if there seems to be quite a lot of teams with quite a lot of money, so I'd probably invest it elsewhere. Lindsay Smith, so 21 on the weekend. He's just gonna, keep ticking over, score some points. He'll probably have the most benefit to our sides in round 16. So I think if you've got him, you hold till then and then you reassess how you want to move forward with that pick. Harry Edwards, so he scored 36 on the weekend, was limited by having to play dummy half with Reed Marnie going off. So did all the defensive work, but just didn't get any runs. So his price has peaked now. He's made 240k, which is, or 230k, no, 240, yeah. No, sorry, I forgot the starting price. So, he's definitely done his job for us. But with the really nice buy coverage that the Bulldogs have, I'd be very inclined to hold. Or even if, say, you had Wiramu Greg but not Harry Edwards, I'd probably prefer that trade over someone like a Stefano or a Royce Hunt. Taniela Paseka, so, didn't play last week with the bye, but, his season average of 58 isn't that far off the gun, so, a real sort of pod option during the next couple of weeks. Max King, so, is now actually cheaper than Tavita Pangai, so if you are looking for a nice sort of second row, front row swing, um, someone that's going to play those buy rounds, I do like Max King as a pick. And then Tommy Gilbert at the bottom of this list, as we said before, is out for the season with that shoulder injury. So if you do have him, you do have to cut him. As we just said, you can make 40 grand out of the trade to Max King. That would be quite nice. Or, if you can find 100k, you can move up to one of those keeper type options. So onto the second row option, 600k and above, and at the top of the list this week is John Bateman. And I actually throw Kyle Matangi in there as well. They both scored over 100 on the weekend. They've both got really nice break evens. I've got them both listed as super pod options. I think they're only at about 3% owned each before the start of this week. So, Bateman obviously has the awesome buy coverage with the Tigers, nicer break even. Is slightly more expensive though, so you have to find an extra 30 grand. Kyle Matangi obviously playing for South. There's always that attacking opportunity. Maybe hindered by Origin selections and whatnot in the next couple of games, but doesn't play around 16 as well. So, I'd probably have Bateman slightly ahead, but I wouldn't begrudge anyone going Kyle Matangi over him. Pat Carrigan, so he's a keeper. 54 is a little bit below par for him, but we forgive. He was backing up from a big Origin game. Isaiah Yo, just for the 83 alone, he deserves the gun status. But as you can see, 67 across the season. Um, yeah, 680k with the 57 break even's pretty nice. Jermaine Hopgood, his season average suggests that he deserves gun status as well. And obviously, Parramatta have a really nice bye schedule coming up. Britton Nikora, he's a gun with supreme bye coverage. 69 on the weekend. That's what we will hope to get from him. Scotty Sorensen. So for those that have him, congratulations on that 175. But it's time to cut him. You've got 770k there. You can get Kalal Matangi and bank 160k. That's ridiculous. That could upgrade someone like a Jackson Ford up to Johnny Bateman. So if you could do that trade, you'd be absolutely cheering. And Dave Fafita, so had a bit of a delayed concussion issue. He's been rested this week. But I think if you've got him, you just hold. He's an absolute gun. There's probably bigger problems in your side that you've got to fix this week, I'd imagine. Um, so yeah, I can understand people wanting to get out of it, wait for him to dip in price and grab it again. But I don't think he'll dip for too long, if I'm being completely honest. He's just been that good this season. On to the mid-range options, and at the top of the list, we've got Bryce Cartwright. So a really nice option during the buys. You can see he's got a nice break even, 500k, which is a nice price for that sort of mid-range option. Um, yeah, I think out of this list, he's probably my pick if you're going a mid-range second rower. Obviously, if you've got the cash, I'd look more at the super pods that we listed previously, or even a Nikora if you've got the money. But obviously, if you're on a budget, I think he's the number one target. Eli Katoa, so keeper status, given I think he's in 20% of sides. Really nice. We know he's attacking upside. Plays around 16 by, so good selection there. Jackson Ford, so back playing 80 minutes and getting a 58. That's what we expect from Jackson Ford. But he's not going to make any more money. He's not going to cover the round 16 buy. So this is the time where you can look to move him to a Bryce Cartwright if you don't have that much money. If you can upgrade him to one of those guns or super pods, that would be a really nice trade also. Jacob Preston, so another keeper option. Obviously, it has nice buy coverage. Um, he's definitely one I'm planning on holding for the season. He might not necessarily make my 17 every week, but with the 60 average and, a bit of upside about him when he gets a sniff of the trial line, definitely worth a season long hold, I reckon. Josh King and Nat Butcher, sort of, equal scores last week, equal type of players with average, as it turns out. Similar sort of upside potential. They're just workhorses for their respective teams. So probably, I'd give them a miss, but I can understand why people would get on. Cam Murray, so 28. I think he did get injured as well in the game, which didn't help. I think you just got to cut your losses here. Wait till the origin period settles. You might get him at a nice discount, but there's just too much value, or too many points going un, untaken. That's not a word. You're going without points if you're trying to hold Cam Murray. Teague Wilton, so with the 92 break even, I think you can wait another week. He's definitely around 16 target. Perhaps like Reed Marnie, you could even wait till round 18 after their bye. And then he'll play every game for the rest of the season, injury pending. and Olaquatu. So a bit of a high break even at the moment. So no rush to get him in, but he could be a very handy pod for the back end of the season. In terms of the cheapy options, there's really not a lot to choose from. Josh Schuster's still hanging on in that below 400k range, but I think next week he'll be in the mid-range section and we'll probably bin the cheapy second rowers unless something comes out of the woodwork unexpected. Um, I did find a couple that are playing their third game this week. So Billy Burns starting for the Dragons. Obviously, that means he doesn't play around 16. Also has a slightly elevated price. He has played a bit before. And Ben Condon from the Sea Eagles. So we'll play next weekend, assuming the team stays the same. But he is starting on the bench and is definitely more of an edge forward than a middle forward, is my understanding anyway. So, I don't like either of those options. Um, yeah, I mean, if I had to pick an option, as I said, I'd swing someone into the front row or someone out of your front row into your second row and bring in Fainu. Onto the halfbacks, and I guess finally time to have some decent conversation about the halfback options. I guess we'll probably start at the bottom and work up a bit different, but Nathan Cleary is the obvious talking point, out until about round 20 with a hamstring injury. So I think you've got to chop him. There is definitely an argument for holding him if um, you can cover elsewhere. If you've got Hines and Cleary, though, it is going to leave you in a situation where you don't have a halfback in round 17. So I think if you're not running the two guns, you could potentially hold Cleary, but at the same time, you've got the money for Hines. So realistically, I think you've got to trade him out. It's just a matter of who you bring in. As I said, the most common sense option if you don't have him is Nico Hines. Right? Because if you don't have Nico Hines, it means you're already carrying someone else as your second halfback. So take the money from Cleary, get on Hines. They're very similar in their scoring abilities. Um, and obviously, they're both in the origin setup, so you're not expecting scores from them in round 16 and 19 anyway. So continuing in reverse order, DCE, I'm going to pass on him. Obviously, playing Origin doesn't help, and just the average isn't really up there where he's a must-have option. I got Braden Trindle on the list. I had a crazy thought when I was putting this list together about people carrying Hines and Trindle. So when Hines isn't playing, Trindle covers. It's not the craziest, I suppose, but it doesn't help you in round 17. So I wouldn't recommend that. Also, with the massive break even, because Trindle sat on the bench for a couple of games, you can probably just wait until, say, round 19 and assess whether you want to, bring him in. But by that time, Cleary's about to come back. That's a couple of trades. So, yeah, that was just me thinking out loud and dismissing Trindle very quickly. Jerome Hughes is another one I think we pass on. He's just not scoring as well as he has in previous seasons. So probably not worth consideration. Matt Burton is an interesting one. He does have the dual position with 5'8". Normally that's where he would appear, but I think a situation like this does provide an opportunity to look at a dual position option. And then when Cleary comes back, you could potentially move Burton back into the 5'8" slot as a keeper. Maybe probably the second 5'8" option, but still a solid option nonetheless. Jamal Fogarty, a few people might look at him after his 97 last week, but I think um, that's probably not the best option. Doesn't play around 16, doesn't have a history of high scoring. I think there's better options available. Jack Cogger. So a lot of people might think, well, I'll just bring in his replacement. Obviously, it's not a like-for-like replacement. You're not necessarily going to be able to replace Cleary with any one individual. But because he's only played the one game, I'd sit and wait. You can have a look this week, and if it does look like he's gonna get some scoring opportunities, it could be a play next week. And saying that doesn't help you this week. If you can cover this week, maybe you do hold Cleary a week and then make that trade next week. Adam Reynolds, so 31 doesn't help his case at all. The talk that he's the front runner for the Origin job doesn't help. Doesn't play round 16 or 19. That doesn't help. So I think he's still a trap for that reason, despite the really low price. The other two options, which I think are both really good options, on top of Matt Burton, even Sean Johnson and Mitchell Moses. So Sean Johnson, obviously coming off the back of a monster score on this weekend, will definitely attract some attention. But the thinking behind this is, he doesn't play round 16, fair. But Nathan Cleary wasn't going to play round 16 either if you were going to hold him. So you've got about $100,000 discount on him to Mitchell Moses. Like I said, he doesn't play round 16, but he will play 17, 18, 19. And then by that time, hopefully, Cleary's looking to make a comeback. So you're only missing out on that 1 week where you're probably going to miss out on a halfback score anyway. If you're well prepared around the rest of the team for round 16, it's best 13. You can get away with not having a halfback. But Mitchell Moses is the other one, which seems more obvious on paper. Plays round 16, plays round 19. Scoring well, averaging 70 for the season. But again, that's the same as Sean Johnson. You do have to pay 120k more, but obviously Cleary more than covers that. And with his lower break even, Mitchell Moses could get to about that price by the time you get back to Nathan Cleary. The one issue with that is Moses is an outside chance of making the Origin side. I probably would have had him behind Hines and Reynolds on the pecking order, but you never know with New South Wales. I guess the other thing as well is a bit of an issue around Dylan Brown. So whether that sort of affects the team in general, and then obviously the spine of Parramatta is a bit of an unknown at this point. So I think if you go for either of those top two options, you're not doing too bad. I do like Burton as a sort of even stronger point of difference with the dual position sort of flick. You can sort of save a trade in that sense because you won't trade him back out. You'll trade someone else you're going to trade out anyway and push Cleary back in. But whichever way you go, uh, you know, it's a bit up in the air. There's no clear and obvious choice unless you don't have Nico Hines. On to the 5/8s. We've got Brandon Wakeham at the top of the list again this week. So, 58 last week, break even of 19 or negative 19. The Tigers playing quite well and attacking quite well. The Tim Sheens method is getting back into it. Could be a really great pot option. If you are looking for something outside of the box to replace Cleary, he is dual position as well. I wouldn't be that brave, but, just throwing it out there as a bit of an option. Luke Metcalf, so he's played 2 games. He'll play his 3rd game this week. Negative break even, really cheap price. Guess his only downside is he doesn't play Origin doesn't play round 16 next week. So, if you can sort of work around that with your 5/8 and you're looking for a downgrade option, he's probably my second best cheapie of the week after Fino this week. Oluwapu, so 26 last week, did go off the field to get Rajab on and get some game time into him. So, he's just going to continue along with that slow burn. His main advantage is his ability to actually be on field when we need him in round 16, round 19. Phoenix Crossland, so, you know, still playing hooker, 3 round average of 56 is nice. If you've got him, we hold him till round 16. He does have that dual position as well, so you could potentially push him up into the halfback slot if you had him, and use the Nathan Cleary money elsewhere. Luke Keary, I got as a bit of a dual position option. Plays in the next buy round. Not one I overly like, but for those that want to take a punt, you could get on. Isaiah Katoa. So even though Milford has been suspended, which sort of shores up his game time, I think you chop him now. He's not playing next week. Um, yeah, I'd rather trade to Luke Metcalf, and Metcalf will be pretty close to Katoa's price by next week. So I'd get off if you're still on Katoa. Kalen Ponga, a bit of a point of difference option. Dual position as well, which is nice. But as you can see, his break even is up around his average. Admittedly, his average is brought down by the concussion games and playing 5/8 for a lot of the season. So you could potentially ignore that, look at the 3 round average of 80 and suggest that, well, maybe he still has a bit more cash in him. So yeah, I guess for me, that's slightly complicated by Tommy Turbo coming back early. I had him in the fullback slot. So yeah, do what you want with Kalen Ponga. Dylan Brown, so at the time of recording, he had appeared in court. Looks like it's going to be adjourned for a few weeks, so no quick resolution to it. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with him and the integrity unit. So, there could be a situation where we have to trade him and Cleary this week, which does limit your trade somewhat when you're trading two halves, particularly if you don't have a boost. I'm lucky I do have one, but I know other people that don't. Cody Walker, so turned up on the weekend. He's a gun, you know, potentially could find his way into Origin if they go with Adam Reynolds at halfback, which would obviously impact his round 19 upside. But, I guess especially if Brown is sat out, him and Munster become the clear top two. So if you've got either of them, you just hold them. Jerome Luai, he's peaked in price. Could be a chance of playing if they decide to switch up both halves because one's injured. I think that would be a bit rough on him. He did play pretty well in game one, and I'm sure he'll fit into whatever system they bring into game two. So I'd absolutely look at trading him out. He's going to leak a lot of cash anyway. And unless you're going right up to Cody Walker, it's pretty easy to get to just about every other option at the position. Joey Manu, so 41 on the weekend, sort of struggled to get involved. I think it was a bit of the Teddy show for the Roosters. He had a point to prove, and he certainly did. But yeah, we know he's going to get more involved, particularly next week when he should slide back to fullback. Sawali getting suspended did help his cause there. So I'm going to hold, and hopefully, he spikes in that game. We can reassess after round 16 if we want to hold or move on. And Cam Munster, we just said that he's a gun. If you've got him, I think you just hold him. He's always going to be a bit up and down with his scoring, but season average of 71 sort of suggests that he is above the majority of the options in that position. Onto the centre wings, premium options, and we'll start with Dallin. Sorry, big train there. Dallin Watene-Zelezniak. So he's had a couple of massive weeks, as you can see, with the 3 round average of 88. But I've got the trap symbol on him. He has been quite good recently, but he has been known to go missing in games. I guess also Warriors on the bye next week, so there's it's a lot of money to pay for someone who's essentially just going to be a quick cash grab and then move on. So for that reason, I'd stay away from DWZ. Charles Nickel Clockstad. So I've talked enough about his work rate throughout the year. Finally getting some reward for it there with 103, 3 round average of 80, negative break even. So he's a keeper. If you haven't got him, I wouldn't overly recommend trading him in. Again, similar to DWZ, Warriors have a bye round 16. But out of those two, I do like Nickel Clockstad better because of his, I guess, more consistent work rate. Speaking about work rate, Greg Marzu, season average of 80. Um, you've got to recognise that as the sort of gun option. Yeah, it's pretty funny, these guys that are averaging, close to 70, and we're not recognising them as gun players. Just sort of goes to show how much scoring there is now in the centre wing position in Supercoach. Speaking of scoring, Val Holmes, 150 on the weekend. So probably for those that have him, they've probably been waiting all season for that sort of score. But he's now on the bye, so he'll miss the next 2 games. I think if you've got him, you do hold him. That's the reason why you got him. But yeah, nice for owners to get a good return on investment. Alex Johnston, so another nice week for him, 107. I guess obviously the downside there is that season average of 61. We know that he is relying on scoring tries, and particularly if they go with the South combination in Origin, that could potentially impact his ability to score when they come back to clubland. So I've got the roller coaster symbol on him just because of that high variability in his scoring. Jermaine Osako, though, he just doesn't seem to have variability in his scoring. He just keeps pumping out massive scores. 114 last week, which is a season average of 81 now. 3 round average of 104. He's getting close to getting a tank symbol. Yeah, I guess it's one of those things where you look at his potential and his ability, and going up through the grades when he was younger, you knew he was gonna be able to do something like this. But I guess based on past evidence, you didn't really think it could happen. But whatever Wayne Bennett's doing to him, he is absolutely loving life. Sifa Talakai, so 58 on the weekend. These bipod options, they're going to have that variable scoring. You just hope to have them at the right time of year, so he's an option. Brian Tyre with the 85 backing up for Penrith after Origin. That's why he's a keeper. I couldn't give him gun status with an average of 64, but we know that he is a gun, and that if you've got him, you just hold him as long as you can. Nick Meaney with an 86, so gun status for him with a season average of 74. Ruben Garrick, same deal, average of 70, gun status. Ronaldo, Mulatalo, Marcus Sevo, a couple of riskier pot options during the buys, if you like. And Campbell Graham, I know I'm sort of flaunting my own system here, 75 average, but refuse to give him the gun symbol. I've just gone with the keeper symbol. Again, a little bit too reliant on scoring tries. Obviously, Souths do score a lot, but yeah, you can see with the 43 last week, we want a slightly higher base from our gun type players. So on to the mid-range options, and Isaiah Tass at the top of the list, I guess, has one of the best break-evens of those named to play this week with a negative 23. But he is a trap. Season average of 60 has been boosted by his last 3 games, as you can see, 3 round average of 81. So I think there's better options. You pay up a little bit more, you've got those premium options we just looked at. Tyrone Peachy, so obviously has dropped out of the side with Isaac Tago coming back from injury. But I think you wait before you sell him. He will play round 16. You'd assume Stephen Crichton's going to get a gig somewhere in the Origin side. So that would obviously open up a spot for Peachy on the opposite centre wing or centre position, three-quarter line. That's what I was trying to say. Yeah, so if you've got him, I think you hold, let him play round 16, and then reassess from there. Taruva, so he's sort of reset his price game with another nice score of 60, 3-round average of 68. So, plays round 16 as well, so really nice option to hold for a few weeks and then cash out later. Josh Adokar, so the Fox is back, 86 last week, so just an excuse to get the Fox symbol back out. Don't think he's a realistic pick though. Jared Croker, so did have him on the chopping block last week, but playing 300 this week, so respect to him. Gets a mention in the stock market video. Paul Alamotti, so continuing his slow burn with the 48. Going to be some good coverage during the round 16, round 19 buys. And then, we might cut our losses and use that 200 grand elsewhere in the run home. Will Penasini, bipod option. Nothing spectacular there. The Hammer, very popular still as a keeper option, but hasn't played for 2 weeks. So, that's fine. Jacob Carraz, so is named to play this week, but I think we still just wait, see that he is actually going to line up. They do have till Monday, which is helpful. But he's definitely one you can wait and get in round 16. I don't think you'll lose a lot of money if you miss out this week. Will Warbrick, so it's probably time to cut, but he does play around 16, so you can just wait until then and then make your move. Khan Pereira, so if you, I was surprised how many people still own him. He has admittedly made a bit more money since I chopped him, but I think it's now time to get out of the pick. He doesn't play next week. After that, I guess it would be good to have for round 19, but yeah, I don't think the base is there for him. And Lemuelu, so a little bit disappointing on the weekend with 38, but he's still our premium option to swing between centre wing and second row, so I think he's worth a hold. Onto the cheap options this week, and at the top of the list we've got Tommy Talau. So I guess finally got that sort of spike in score that we've been hoping for, which has now sort of reset his cash generation. So with the Supreme buy coverage, he could be a really nice downgrade option. If you are looking to get out of, say, a Warbrick or those type of players, will play in the upcoming rounds. And with the Tigers' attack on the up and up, he could definitely be a beneficiary of that. Semi Valame, so a few people get very excited about his debut for the Cowboys with 114, scoring 3 tries. They're on the bye this week, so I don't think you have to rush to get him in. If you wanted to, you could potentially go early next week to make up a number. But then going forward, not quite sure where he fits in. I'm pretty sure he's taking Kyle Felt's spot, so he may have that place on merit. But, you can always wait and see. Rocco Berry, so an option I tossed up last week. Unfortunately, HIA'd out with a 9. So that's sort of ruined any cash generation in the short term for him. Valence Tafari, so named to start on the bench again this week for the Dolphins. So the big scores got out of his rolling average, which doesn't help. But, it won't be long until that super low score gets out of it too. So he'll just slow burn for the next few weeks. If you got him in at bottom dollar, you're probably okay with that. I wouldn't recommend trading him in now though. Blake Wilson, so ended up filling in for Jacob Kiraz, got his 3rd game. Probably didn't quite have the workload we were hoping for. So, only got a 20, so another sort of slow burning option if you ended up going for that option like I did. Billy Smith, I've got the weight symbol on, so if you've got him, you hold till after round 16. If you didn't get on him, you don't worry about getting on him. He's not going to make that much more money in the coming weeks. And Michael Cheekham, so it looks like he's sort of slipped it down the pole a bit now that Colin Matangi's back. So it might be time to get out of Michael Cheekham. Still offers that nice dual position swing though. And onto the fullback position, and Dream Buller is once again at the top of the list. So if you had him since the start of the year, or since his debut, or since his third game even, you've made yourself $370,000, and he still has a negative 56 break even. It's a bit mind melting when you look at it like that. In saying that, you can still absolutely get on. He has 111 in his latest 3 round average of 93. Supreme buy coverage. I think out of all of these players, he's the one that everyone should have. If they don't already have him, get him in. Teddy, so like we said before, had a point to prove after Origin and absolutely did that. Fortunately for me, it was against the Bulldogs. But 118, 3 round average of 88. So he's earned the gun symbol back. We know what he's capable of. Turbo, so got the exemption. He's going to play this week. So I guess last week I was somewhat cheering that, he wasn't going to be back for a couple of weeks, and I look like a genius trading him out. Now I look a bit silly potentially trading him back in. But he's a gun, so I think it might be worth it. Scotty Drinkwater, so 3 round average of 105. Doesn't play this week, but will play next week. So I think at the moment you hold him until about round 19, and then you reassess if you have him. Will Kennedy, a bit of a pot option that will play round 16, 19. Um, Obviously, if you wanted one of those players, you pick Buller over him. I don't think you can afford to have both in your side. But if you want to be different, Will Kennedy won't let you down. Reece Walsh, so got him as a keeper. Um, Whether he is or not now that, Teddy's back in form, Turbo's back, Latrell not quite back yet, but, you may want to hold just to save a trade. So yeah, I think Reece Walsh is down the pecking order a bit. I'd look at moving him on myself, but that's just one man's opinion. Clint Gutherson, another bipod option, very much in the same category as Mitchell Moses. Could be affected by the Dylan Brown situation. But yeah, if you like the cut of his jib, you could get him in. Dylan Edwards, so 39 last week, which means he's got a massive break even. So he's probably one I'd avoid, but I know some people do like him as a nice point of difference. And with Latrell injured again and either on the bye or playing Origin next week, I think he's actually on the chopping block. I think really it's got to be Dream Buller and then one of Teddy or Turbo. Personally leaning towards Turbo just because he has that slightly higher ceiling. But, I don't think you can go too far wrong with either of them. It just comes down to personal preference. Unless you got Scott Drinkwater, in which case then it's probably Drinkwater. And like I said, Buller I think is a must-have just with that cash generation, the buy coverage, the whole package. All right, so I guess in summary, it's a bit of a buy, keep, sell, avoid to finish up. It's been a bit of a long video. Yeah, fairly long video. I do apologise. But on the buy list, I've gone with Sean Johnson. I think out of the halfback situation, he's my preference just because of that slightly cheaper price point and the fact that, we're not anticipating Cleary playing round 16 anyway, or we weren't. anticipating him to play anyway. So, we're not losing anything there. And he covers round 19 as well. So that's a bit of forward buy planning. If you went Mitchell Moses, I wouldn't blame you. Um, if you wanted to wait a week, I wouldn't blame you either, just to reassess the situation further, see who actually gets picked for New South Wales, and go from there. And also Fino. So as I said, the best sort of downgrade option for this week in the front row. So, you're looking at the likes of Wiramu, Greg could go, Tommy Gilbert could go. There was someone else I wanted to chop in the forwards. Who was it? Or had to? Can't think off the top of my head. So perfect sort of replacement there for them. I mean, if you did need more of a centre wing option, I think Tommy Talau could be a really good shout. He's one I went on earlier in the year and it didn't work out for me. But Tigers are playing much better now, so would recommend that as an alternative backup option. Um, on the keep list, David Fafita, he's being rested. He'll play Origin next week, but the Titans have the bye anyway, so you weren't planning on playing him. And then he'll be back for the back end of the season. No worries there. Keep Tyrone Peachy. Expect him to play round 16 and get one more price rise. Then you can move him on. On the sell list, I've got Nathan Cleary as the obvious one. We do have to sell. We can't hold that much money on our bench for 6 weeks, particularly in the halfback position where you only get two players and Nico Hines doesn't have the strongest availability. And also, we might have to sell Dylan Brown. I've gone a bit early on this. My gut feeling is that he will be stood down. And that's just not me saying that as a Bulldogs fan that hopes he's not playing. I do hope he's playing because that would suggest that he's potentially all innocent in that. But yeah, in terms of who we might have to sell, I think his name's high on the list. In terms of the avoiding Jack Cogger, just give him a chance this week, see how he goes. You could bring him in next week if you so wish. And avoid the likes of DWZ. So, you know, sort of got the high 3 round average, the low break even, but the scoring variability is probably not worth the risk at this point of the season. All right, so that wraps up the stock market video. As I said, it's a massive week, lots of decisions to be made. We'll have the round preview video coming up tomorrow. If you're watching this, not live, but as it comes out, probably it's going to be a bit of a longer one too. Just a spoiler alert. We'll do a bit of a sort of state of the union. Obviously, halfway point of the season. It's a good opportunity to reflect and sort of discuss the plan moving forward. But other than that, as always, feel free to comment. If you've got any thoughts or strong opinions on the players I've mentioned, players I've forgotten to mention. If you are enjoying the content, please like the videos and subscribe to the channel. And other than that, thanks for watching.